Kia ora koutou, I'm Natalie, one of the tutors here at Massey Albany, and we're very, very fortunate to be able to speak to Lisa Allen, who is, amongst other things, an illustrator, and talk about her work on this book, ANZAC Day Parade, which she created with Glenda Kane. So, Lisa, thank you.
Thank you.
This book is not a typical children's book.
No, it's a sophisticated picture book, which means it's designed for sort of ages 7 and upwards, and adults, actually. So it seems like it's just a storybook, but it's a bit more than that.
This is what struck me when I was talking to you. There's so much that went into this.
Yes.
So it started with a poem.
It did. The author Glenda Kane had been attending a dawn service at, I think, Devonport, and she noticed an old soldier off by himself. And so she started to conjecture, what was he thinking, what was he feeling, you know, what was his story. And then she went home and sat down and wrote this poem, and based it around the Battle of Crete, which is sort of quite an unknown or not well-known part of World War II.
Yes. And then the research that went into this, like talked about your work at the museum and also with a return serviceman.
Yeah, we had a lot of research, like months went into this, but the most important part was actually finding a Crete veteran to talk to, who'd be willing to talk to us. And so the RSA put us in touch with a man called Noel Drongol, who lived in Papakura, who'd been captured by the Germans in Crete. And he and his wife were happy to talk to us, and initially she said we could have an hour with him because he wasn't well, but we ended up being there for about 5 hours, and he was very emotional, and he discussed stuff with us that he'd never even talked to her about. So it was really a privilege. It was an amazing day.
Yeah. And the stuff that you discussed, I mean, this is not a story that glorifies war in any way.
No,
it's quite the opposite.
No, and I think he'd seen a copy of the poem beforehand, and it really struck me, really liked it. And it was an opportunity for him to sort of talk about the unpalatable truths, and he felt that it was time his personal story was told in a way through this. He was, you know, coming towards the end of his life, and there was a lot that he hadn't even talked to about the war with his own children. So he felt it was important to tell us what he went through, and he did in great detail. And it wasn't a nice story at all. It was a lot of suffering, a lot of trauma, and he was still suffering from the effects of post-traumatic stress disorder in his 90s. So, you know, he was waking in the middle of the night still, nightmares.
Yeah. And the character in this is also suffering from trauma. He goes off to drink. He's remembering his friends who were killed in this. And yet, even though it is such a confronting story, it's actually been received really well.
Yeah, it has. At the time, there was nothing else like it in the sort of ANZAC Day sort of genre for picture books or other material that was there. It's been very well received in Australia. They seem to be much more open in the discourse about the sort of horrors of war, I think. And it came at a time where teachers were wanting to talk to children, have conversations about the realities of things, you know, because it's very easy around ANZAC Day to go, you know, medals, marching, pomp ceremony, all of that, and actually, you know, these are personal stories of psychological trauma and terror, and, you know, men sent to do things they didn't want to do, and how they survived that, really. So
you said even though there is all this depth behind it, the children almost seem to get this.
They do, and I've got sons, and boys and guns and all of that. But this was a very intimate conversation between a boy and a man about this, hurting people is not great. It's what you want to avoid. And I think in Noel's story, personally, he wanted his story through this to be a instructive thing to say to people, war is to be avoided at all costs. And at the end of the book, we use the War Memorial Museum as a backdrop. And at the end of the book, there is the space in the museum that says, "Let these panels never be filled," which is an actual marble sort of blank space at part of the museum. And that was his message personally through the book.
And you said people have responded to this sometimes with their own stories as well.
Yes, and there's been lots of mail from children of Creek veterans in particular, but all sorts of people across the RSA, across New Zealand and Australia, teachers, that it's been sort of an important story to tell, and that it's kind of universal in a way. It's about Creek, but it could apply to other battles and other experiences. Yeah.
Wow, if you guys are intrigued by this book, ANZAC Day Parade, is actually available through the Massey Library, as I'm sure it's available through all the local public libraries as well. So Lisa, thank you so much for that. It was very interesting.
Thank you.